the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Clint, how are you?
I'm good.
You smell really good.
Yeah, it's that YVS.
YSL.
YSL.
You know, I was thinking about how there are so many people who work in certain professions, and a lot of the times they can turn their lives into this sort of echo chamber because they only hang around like-minded people or people who are of the same profession. And then I was thinking about how there are a lot of first responders who are married to first responders. And while it's great and I understand the concept of surrounding yourself with people who just understand and who get it and who live the lifestyle and all the things, however, I feel like a lot of the times it can also hamper your growth.
Yeah, I think when you're around like-minded people all the time, you're not getting new experiences. You're reliving shared experiences, or kind of like you're reliving that same cycle all the time.
Well, another component to that, and if we're honest, this is the bottom line truth, is that it actually feels safe. And the reason it feels safe is because you're not going to have to worry about being judged, or, you know, we use all the things like somebody else just doesn't understand. But in reality, it's because you don't want to be questioned. You don't want to have anybody challenge you. And it's those types of interactions that allow us to be able to have that introspection and then to be able to kind of counter those questions and even dig a little bit deeper on those concepts for ourselves.
Yeah, it's that comfort zone, like you said, is you don't have to explain yourself further or articulate it to rationalize why you did something or why you're feeling the way you did over a specific instance or story.
I have some examples of this, and one is that you might be incredibly dismissive unless it comes from, quote, one of us.
Yeah, I think with that, it's, you know, I don't know what the word belittling keeps coming up for me on it, but it's not belittling. It's one of those instances where you really shrug off a story, or you shrug off an incident towards others, or you're not wanting to explain it because you know you're going to have to go more in depth than trying to articulate your beliefs or your standpoints on why you did it.
Yeah, and when you feel challenged in that way, and then you don't have the desire to kind of go into your own wisdom and experience in order to be able to pull out the responses for those types of challenges, that should be an indication that there's a lack of growth in that area. And I see that happening all of the time. I see people who might tune out their therapist, their pastors, their spouse even, because, they've never worn the uniform before. And when we do that, we're missing out on a lot of wisdom, and I actually think we're even missing out on some element of limited emotional perspective too.
You know, as you were saying that, what came up for me and what I was thinking is kind of the same dynamic goes to not only the profession, but, well, you don't have kids. And we've heard this numerous times as, oh, you don't have kids, you wouldn't understand. And in some instances, I agree, but for the most part, like, you can have a human nature experience with it and have that understanding.
Yeah, my counter to that is always, it's because I don't have kids that I do see it this way. And, you know, it's not right or wrong either way. I think that the point is to just be open to those perspectives. But a lot of the times, like, that's a great example because we do hear that all of the time. But for those people that do have kids and then they find out that we don't, and then a topic comes up and we have an open conversation, it quickly gets closed down from the person that I don't want to hear it because I have kids.
You know, I just had an idea. We need to just start pretending for like new people. We'll say, oh yeah, our kids. And then we can give our own perspective on it, because that will change their whole mindset towards the situation in that instance.
I was on a live conference call with me and I think it was like 6 other gentlemen, and the person who was leading the call had said something to me. He and I were kind of in the midst of a conversation. He's like, Yeah, well, when you're with your kids, how many kids do you have? And I pause and I look at him and I'm like, I don't have kids. And then I put this like incredibly weird, awkward silence. And then somebody else was like, but she's good at practicing. And then the person leading the conversation didn't catch that. I'm like, he said something and it made me understand that he didn't hear what the other guy said. I'm like, he's just kidding. But like, obviously he did it to break that awkward silence, but it's really crazy to think about because a lot of the times too, I see people who become very uncomfortable when they're around people who are not first responders or they're not in the same profession that they're in. And you don't know how to talk about anything besides work or trauma or the job. And that too showcases that you need some diversity when it comes to your socialization skills.
Yeah, you need to broaden your horizons when it comes to that, because when you're in that same cycle all the time, you're not able to expose yourself, one, to different situations, but two, to be able to have a support system outside of your normal day-to-day.
Something else that I see is that when you're caught up in this singular sphere of influence, what happens too is that a lot of times toxic behavior is treated like it's normal. So drinking, sometimes emotional shutdown, a relationship strain, it's just how it is, for example. And this just reinforces those unhealthy cycles.
Yeah, leaning on those unhealthy cycles within your day-to-day is that's why you see a lot of first responders and military members. They lean on to alcohol, they lean on to these different types of addictions that become unhealthy because you're around that environment all the time, and it becomes a normalcy.
Oftentimes, too, I'm seeing this resistance when it comes to personal growth because it just feels too soft, right? And I also see a lot of people who struggle to even imagine a life outside of the job. Every conversation, every plan, every thought just revolves around being in service or, being a doctor or like whatever the thing is. And this leads to a lot of burnout. And also it can make it incredibly difficult when it comes to transitioning out of the role at one point in your life.
Yeah, you need to... And I think that's the hardest thing, and we've talked about it before, is so many people identify as what their profession is instead of identifying as who they are as an individual. And, you say, I am the blue line, or I am, XYZ, whatever it may be. And you have to find that identity for yourself outside of your profession.
There are a lot of ways to be able to break that echo chamber and then expand your entire world. And I think one of them is to just cross-reference those narratives that you keep repeating. And what I mean by that is there's probably going to be a lot of things that have come up in the same conversations with the same types of people that are on repeat constantly. And so when that happens, just cross-check those narratives and see if it's something that you might be able to challenge yourself on. And also, it's important to be curious and not defensive. That's something that I see a lot. It's okay that other people have outside perspectives, and it's okay for you to change your mind on yours. And I think that growth doesn't really mean that you're rejecting your tribe, so to speak, but it means that you're just adding more tools to your toolkit.
Yeah, and I think it's really easy to reject that outside perspective, or being willing to accept that change for yourself, or to say that you're wrong or change your mind on something. And I think that's a huge step in making a difference.
I get this attribute from my dad, and that is that I am like a friend to everybody. And I think it's so important to learn how to build your friendships outside of your little bubble. And diversity in thought really helps to be able to lead to deeper and better conversations, more empathy, more self-awareness. And we only know what we know. And something that I have come to learn and really practice, especially as I get older, is to just seek out those thoughts and opinions from people who have real life experience that I don't.
Yeah, being able to have those shared experiences or that knowledge from others, because you're not going to always have a larger perspective if you're not open to hearing about it.
And it's so interesting when you think about being in your inner circle, if you're caught up in this fear and you talk to your coworkers about, oh yeah, my friend who's a janitor, for example, and then you share something really powerful that maybe you and your friend experienced together, or some wisdom that they shared, some personal life experience that may be applicable to the conversation that you're having at the moment, then it's kind of like, oh, well, he's a cop, for example, and then he's friends with a janitor. Like, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah, being able to have broaden your circle when it comes to any of these situations is super important, because you want to be able to identify as who you are as an individual.
I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below, and as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.